moving into the next item, this is item number 12, at the request of council members Alarcon and Clark, City Council to determine whether to reconsider and/or amend the motion and vote made on February 28th, 2022, City Council meeting regarding the selection of Map 2A as the proposed final map for consideration of adopting at the City Council meeting for March 28th, 2022. And with that, could I have staff report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to take a team approach on this item, so I'm going to start off, and then I'm going to turn it over to Olivia Uribe Mutal, our program manager, who's been doing so much work on this matter over the years. And Jenna Akos, our legal counsel, of course, city attorney, is here also to answer questions and support. And Paul Mitchell with Redistricting Partners is also available from our consultant team. So I'll start off and talk a little bit about how we got here, give you some background to facilitate discussion. Olivia will then take over and talk about the mapping process to date. She'll also talk about the maps and the preparation of the maps that your council has considered to date. She'll also talk about the mapping criteria established by the Fair Maps Act. And then it'll return to me, and I'll talk about some of the comments you've received. You've received a number of written comments from the public, and we believe that it would be helpful to facilitate understanding and discussion to go over a response to some of the questions that came out of those comments. And then again, we'll do an overview of the options available to the council. So that's the way we'll proceed. If you have any questions, Mayor, otherwise I can jump in.
Any questions of staff? Go ahead.
Okay. Great. So this matter comes before you, as the mayor indicated, with a request from two council members. And I just want to remind the public and the council that it is our practice here at the City of Carpinteria, has been for many, many years, decades, that any two council members or the mayor may request that a matter be put on the council agenda for consideration. So that's how this matter came. Two council members, Vice Mayor Clark and Council Member Alarcon, have requested this matter be before the council. What's being asked is for reconsideration of a February 28th vote to select one map for consideration of final map adoption at the March 28th meeting. Tonight, the council can, after receiving the staff report and public comment, take an initial vote on whether or not to reconsider the council action of February 28th. And again, that was to elevate map A2 alone for consideration as the final map for approval on March 28th. If approved by majority vote to move forward with reconsideration, council can then deliberate on the development of an additional map and ask staff to work with the consultant to prepare that additional map for consideration on March 28th. So then there'd be two maps to consider on the 28th map, so-called map A2, and whatever other map we get direction on this evening. So that's kind of how we got here and what's before the council, and I'll turn it over to Olivia to talk about the mapping process.
So as you know, we started the committee work was the first part of this process. And the committee was created. It included Vice Mayor Clark and Council Member Alarcon. And they met in public, in the public process, and they were tasked with creating a process for how we were going to tackle this. They worked on hiring the redistricting partners and helped be kind of a soundboard as we created some of the public engagement process. And they concluded their work on October 20th of 2021. When they concluded their work, no public hearings had happened yet. The first public hearing had yet to happen when that was a pre-mapping hearing, so no maps had been created at that time other than drafts of community of interest maps had been done in District R. Then we went into the public meeting and input part of this phase. And there have been 9 public meetings in total, including 4 scheduled hearings. The last one was the February 28th meeting, and 3 public workshops. And we have the dates available for those if needed. We've created a website was created, and there were tools. There was a placemat that was created that was mailed to each residence within the city of Carpinteria. And we had an online mapping tool. And in total, between community of interest maps, paper maps, and online maps, we received 159 maps to date. 5 meetings. It requires, according to Fair Maps Act, it requires 5 meetings for us to adopt a map. And we've had 4. We need 1 more. And our deadline is going to be to turn in final maps and final maps to the county registrar office by April 22nd. Then the consultants prepared 3 maps based on public submittals. The consultants determined legal compliance for each of the maps, and they relied on both communities of interest and district maps. And they followed all of the rules, which included less than 10% deviation. They found some of the following themes from all of the maps that were submitted. And that was using the 101 as a boundary, keeping the coast together, keeping the northeast together, and keeping downtown beach area together. One of the things throughout the staff report that I wanted to note was we refer to maps and plans, and it's not synonymous. Maps are drawings of boundaries. Plans includes all of the demographic data and all of the specific numbers that are required in the analysis in order to comply, to meet legal compliance. Council has full discretion to select, reject, or modify plans. Consensus is not required. A simple majority can approve a final map. Council, on February 28th, elevated for consideration final map and Plan A2. The criteria used for all of the maps and plans that were submitted was the criteria set by the Fair Maps Act, which includes districts to be of relatively equal size, contiguous districts. We strive to maintain communities of interest, follow city and census designated place boundaries, and to keep the districts compact. Dave will now address some of the comments that we've received in writing. And we also have, I don't know if we've mentioned, but we also have Paul Mitchell, our consultant, available to help answer questions as we continue to move forward.
Thanks, Olivia. So as I mentioned, we received a number of written comments that are part of the materials before your council and have been posted and made available also to the public. And I'd like to go through a couple of responses, not that this is the be-and-all response, but to, again, facilitate understanding and discussion as your council engages in deliberation and receives additional public input. One question that we've seen pop up, and some of these questions, by the way, are recurring questions that have come up. They're good questions. They've come up through the committee process, and they continue to come up as new folks are either engaged or as they view maps. The questions arise again based on the iterative process of map development. So I think they're good to review in general. One is about census block boundaries and why or are we tied to the census blocks. People use the mapping tool. I'm going to refer, by the way, to the city's website, the portal to the district mapping process, and click on the mapping tool here and go to the district mapping tool just to show how the mapping tool works. Some of you that have used it are familiar with it. You click on the brush and you can kind of paint your district boundaries, and you'll see as I'm scrolling over this that it clicks through based on these little quadrants, and those are block groups. Those are census block groups, and we are required to follow the census block group boundaries. There was a meeting that the committee had where this was discussed in great detail, and one of the representatives of Redistrict Partners talked about both the legal aspects of complying with the district boundaries and the practical aspects of complying with these boundaries. Once you stray from those boundaries, we know we have information in the record from the census on all the demographic data for each of these block groups. Once you stray from that, you don't have that. And so it really puts you at risk of a challenge that whatever district is affected by that change, you don't have data you can lean on to defend the boundary. So there's both practical and legal aspects of that, but that's the way the district or our tool works. It's following the district boundaries, and so that question continues to come up, and we want to kind of tee that up if your council wants more discussion on that. There's also questions about understanding where the lines are. We appreciate and acknowledge that the tools that are available are limited. They're inherently limited. The level of detail we can provide. So the paper maps, for example, are limited by their scale and the information that can be in the paper maps that were mailed out to every household in the city. And even the online tool, I'll go to one of the maps here. This is the map that the council has elevated, map A2, and here's the map. And you can only see so much detail. Now we can scroll in, and as you scroll in this map, you can start to see, if your eyes are good, the boundaries and roadways and things as they appear. But it's not always easy. We appreciate that. And you can, if you know the tool, you can start unclicking things and seeing these things in a little more detail. And so, as you go around to the different areas, you can see the footprints of homes in the subdivisions, street names, and you can see where there might be a boundary here. And you might, what's that boundary? Is that the freeway or is that something else? So this will show you that that is, a boundary along the highway. So, we have talked to people, encouraged folks to ask us questions if they have concerns about how that works. But it's acknowledge that it's not a perfect tool, but it is the tools that are available for the public to use, and we can talk some more about that. If there's questions about particular boundaries or particular lines tonight, we can toggle through this stuff and help your council if you elect to direct us on an additional map. There's Olivia touched on this. There were some questions that came up about a committee map. Did the committee, the council committee, Vice Mayor Clark, Councilmember Alarcon, forward a map for consideration? The answer is no. As it was indicated, that wasn't a part of the charge of the committee, and there was no map that came out of the committee process. There's questions about the intent of maps and lines that were drawn. A lot of correspondence that your council received referred to what they believe was intent from either members of the public in drawing maps or council members in supporting one map or another. And we want to encourage the council, as if you get to the point of deliberating on and providing direction on maps tonight, to focus on criteria that Olivia went over, and the consultant can assist in focusing on some of the criteria that's appropriate for considering maps under the Fair Maps Act versus some of the presumptions about intent that might be floating around out there for different maps. This will help us ensure that whatever map is selected and district lines drawn, that they're supported by the law and will be a defendable map going forward. So we received some comment on that, and again, we can talk about that as your deliberation progresses here this evening, assuming it does. There was some questions about that we had a 3-2 vote of the council at the February 28th meeting to elevate map A2, and maybe implication in those comments that somehow represented a flawed process. And we just want to make clear for the public, and I know that your council is aware of this, that consensus is not required for these maps. Simple majority approval is sufficient to elevate a map, and ultimately, when the council does approve a final map, a simple majority vote is all that's required, not consensus. There was also a question of some implication or questions about whether Map A or Map A2, the iteration of Map A, meet law. And again, we can talk about compliance with the Federal Maps Act and the CVRA. It was reported previously that the maps were the A, B, and C that were initially reviewed by the council in late January were distilled from the public map. All those maps meet the Federal Maps Act and the CVRA, and as does its iteration A2 as it was presented at your last meeting. But again, we realize there may be questions on that, and Paul Mitchell is here to talk in more detail, if necessary, about the process that they went through in order to distill all those 150 some odd maps down into several maps for your council's consideration. And then Jenna's here, who can talk about prospects and risks, legal risks associated with our process and where we're at to date. If your council has questions, we know there were some folks that raised questions about litigation risks based on the current map that's been elevated by the council or other maps going forward. We want to make sure that you know and you're comfortable asking any questions, and we can kind of talk about that given the maps and the process that we've gone through to date. And so then, just to review our focus for tonight, the question is, does the council wish to reconsider the February 28th decision to limit a final map hearing to consideration of map A2, or does it wish to? And if it votes yes for that, then it should hear proposals from council members and deliberate on what other map or maps it wishes to elevate. So you have one map that's been designated to be elevated for final map consideration. That's map A2. And the question is, do you want to consider other maps? If so, then we would have a deliberation on that this evening. And based on the direction provided through a vote of the council, staff would work with a consultant to prepare another map or maps for consideration along with map A2 at the March 28th meeting. That concludes our staff report, and we're all available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions of staff?
I do. First, I'd like to disclose that I met with former Mayor Donna Jordan on March 8th. And some clarification, Dave. When the boundary is drawn right on a street, like in El Caro near San Ynez, are one side of the streets in one district and one side's in the other? That's and same with Star Pine. Does it go right down the middle of Star Pine? Is that the boundary, or is both sides of the street in the same district?
Yeah, so this, thank you for that question. It's very helpful. It illustrates two things that I touched on. One is that block groups, drive boundaries. So block groups sometimes, maybe even often, split neighborhoods, right? So, a subdivision that we all associate with the Star Pine Street, you may have block groups that one side of Star Pine is in one block group and another is on the other. So there is the possibility then in drawing districts, because the block groups organize that way, that you can split a street one side in one district, one side in the other. This is the line you talked about on Star Pine. So here you can see Star Pine show up here, but it's difficult to see the actual street, and it's difficult to see the footprint of the home, so I'll toggle off the coloring for the districts, and then now you can see, toggled on, toggled off, the footprints of the homes there.
And how does that continue to
view.
Casitas Pass? That's another one of my questions. Is that going
here's
right?
Casitas Pass Road. You can see the district boundaries here. Kind of follow Casitas Pass and then pick up on the
So
north.
it goes right through a property, or what is
north
that?
side of the subdivision here. Yeah.
Okay. And is there any information that that's a bad thing?
I'm sorry, the
That
question
when it
is-
goes right down a street like that and it divides the neighborhood, I mean, right away you think that it's a bad thing, but is there anything as far as, is that considered not good?
Yeah, I'll answer in general, and then Mr. Mitchell, again, is here that might be able to answer in more detail. So we rely on our process, right, for the public's input on communities of interest and where they think, district boundaries should lie in relation to those community interests and what they believe are proper district boundaries. And so we went through a lot of workshops and public information to start to get people to think about what their communities of interest are. So sometimes that could include, for various reasons, I imagine, splitting a neighborhood. Sometimes it might mean keeping neighborhoods together depending on how people envision their communities of interest. So it's not impossible that you could see both. You could see some neighborhoods that are kept intact as a community interest, and others, for various reasons, that there's other communities of interest in play that might mean that it's split. So I think you could see either. Ultimately, again, we'll reiterate this, the council weighs that, so the consultant distilled all that information that was brought in from the public, and they aren't experts on our community. They're relying on the public to prepare the mapping as experts in our community on what communities of interest are. And then your council has full discretion to accept, modify, propose new maps based on the information brought forward through the process to this date. And so you ultimately are making also those judgments about what's an appropriate community of interest as has been interpreted to date through the process, and again can make decisions to accept, amend, or prepare new maps for consideration as the final map.
I think it should be pointed out also that map model and the way it works actually uses census block specific. So we don't have the option of putting a street back together, both sides, unless we move two census blocks together.
Yeah, Mayor, that's a good point, and this might be a good chance for Mr. Mitchell to weigh in, because they've done analysis on when you move, but because you're using these census block size chunks that have certain populations associated with it, and because our districts are relatively small, one block group can make a big swing in population and make it challenging, as some of you who worked on these maps and prepared them, I know Vice Mayor Clark has talked about this, makes it challenging to get that balance right between population and not violating the maximum disparity in terms of population.
And Mayor Nomura, before we turn it over to Paul, just a little additional text on that. So the Fair Maps Act does actually use, it sets out the different criteria that you can use to draw district boundaries. And at the beginning of each of those criteria, it has a phrase that says, to the extent practicable. And so I think that that also highlights the fact that it may not always be practicable to include entire neighborhoods or communities of interest because we're dealing with these block groups.
Paul, are you available?
Do we have Paul on there? Aaron?
Aaron, is Mr. Mitchell on the Zoom?
Yeah, there's someone under Olivia's name, so I'm going to allow them to talk. I've
thank
just
you.
texted her to ask that question.
Thanks, Aaron.
Hello, this is Paul.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much. I think you said it really well. In the redistricting process, we are required to use those census blocks. And oftentimes, if you're doing redistricting for, say, a congressional district and it's 700,000 people, then one little census block with 120 or 140 people in it won't really kind of mess up your plan. You can always make those kind of adjustments. But when you're in a city the size of Carpinteria, there are more challenges in drawing these districts and keeping them equal size even if you have a census block that is 120 or 140 people, moving that from one district to the other can mess up your entire 10% deviation. So you're only allowed to have the largest district be no more than 10% larger than the smallest district. And when you look at our actual counts, that really means that for the most part, you want to have districts that are maybe no more than 150 over or 150 under the total district size. So if you have a census block that, you know, is 30 or 40 people, even something like that can make it challenging to move that to another district without messing up that total plan deviation. And the plan that you've adopted follows a lot of the criteria that was set forth in the public maps. And so that's the basis we used for drawing these lines. We're required to use the rank criteria in the Fair Maps Act in order to construct these districts, and we used the public submissions as kind of our guideposts along the way. And so if you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions?
I don't.
No? Okay, thank you. We have anything else then for staff?
That concludes our report, Mayor. And again, we're kind of in the question and answer. If there's more questions, we are, of course, continue to be available.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Okay. We probably will have some questions, but we'll ask them as they come along. Okay, at this time then, I'm going to open this up for public comment. We will limit presentations to 3 minutes. I've got 12 speaker slips here, and I don't know how many we have online. I would like to say this before we get started, and that is the decision to go to districts was not something that the city sought, but it was something that was actually kind of brought upon us. And one of the concerns I had at that time was that this districting potentially, and it was something we had to do. Ideally, we'll have benefits from it. But I had a concern that it was actually going to divide the community. I think that was one of the harsh realities of becoming a district, is that you may have interest groups specific. I'm saying this because I want us to try and stay a tight-knit community. Even though we have to go through districting in this process, I want to make sure that we move forward with it fairly and make sure that we are respectful of each other's ideas, thoughts, and hopefully we move forward again with an intact city in place. I fear that there may potentially be fracturing within the community, which I really would hate to see. We've seen this happen before, and it's ruined a lot of communities. So I'm putting this out there because as public comment comes forward, remember, we're all in this together. I want to make sure that we get this to the best outcomes and solutions we can. That being said, I will now go to public comment, starting first with Jim Taylor.
Jim Taylor. I'm with the Carpinteria Valley Association. I think you've probably all seen the letter that our president, Mike Wondolowski, wrote, as well as a couple that were published in the newspaper. These letters have in common the observation that it looks like there's some, shenanigan going on, some setting up of districts to suit the current council members. I don't know that that's the case. In fact, the map that I drew and submitted accomplished about the same thing, separating Roy's from Wade's and so forth. I didn't even consider your addresses. It's really hard to draw these maps splitting such a small city into 5 logical groups. I mean, we have mobile homes. That's a beautiful community of interest. That would be great, except they're scattered all throughout the city. I mean, you just can't do it. So the neighborhoods are not contiguous. So it's really difficult. I'd like to think back to the agenda item just before this, how the feeling in this room was so good with the council acting unanimously in the community's interests. And I would like to suggest that I know it's not required, that only a majority is needed. But I think the advantage of reconsidering this A2 map would be that you might be able to hash it out to find a map that you could vote on unanimously. And I think going forward, this is like our Constitution. This is how we constitute ourselves to govern the city in the future. And I'd kind of like to see all of our currently elected representatives sign that document.
Thank you. Next, I have Fred Shaw.
Getting old, sorry, moving slower. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. Last council meeting, I endorsed MAP A2 out of the 4 choices that staff, council, and the consultant gave us. After the meeting, I was asked by an interested resident why I'd selected MAP A2, and I felt that it's because it best avoided crossing the freeway and protected our communities of interest. But the resident, who's considerably more computer literate than me, showed me that if you expand the map enough, it showed that streets in the Star Pine neighborhood and the Pacific Village neighborhoods had been split. And I had always believed that the initial premise on which we started the idea of district elections was to better represent like communities of interest. And it seems to me that if you live across the street from someone in the same neighborhood, that's probably as much of a community of interest as you could ever ask for. So that being said, I would just encourage the council to not separate streets within those 2 particular neighborhoods, as it just seems like then you and your neighbor would be voting possibly on the same issue, but with totally different representation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Lorraine McIntyre.
Hello, Wade, Mayor, Council, staff. Thank you very much for making this process very transparent. I find it really unbelievable that anybody would oppose a process that was participated in by a wide majority of community members and insinuate that there was any kind of funny business going on here. I, for one, live in District D, and it's a very clean line. You see from that map, you have 3 districts above 101 and 2 districts below. 101 is a natural divider. Yes, somebody across the freeway is in a different district. We may have something in common, but that's just the way the map is. Also, District D is tied together by Via Real. We all have access to that Via Real as a frontage road. Via Real doesn't go past Linden. You can't get from Linden to Santa Monica without getting on the freeway. So it makes a very common sense to me that District D would include anybody that has that Via Real as an access point. And so I drew the map with that in mind, and very early on in the process, the council had suggested that we get neighbors, interested in this process. And I've been to every meeting. I've read every letter and publication on this topic. I tried to spirit my neighbors to get involved with the map. You got 140 maps or more. Maybe some of those were my neighbors, and they may have drawn District D the same way I drew it because, I did point that out to them. So I find it very dispirited to see the council fighting with each other over something that was transparent in the community, and I don't know what the agenda is. I don't know what Natalia and Al's agenda is for not agreeing with A2. I don't know, are they targeting Greg and Roy specifically, or Roy and Wade specifically? So I think that you have to listen to the community, you have to trust the process, and it worked. And just as we heard from the expert on the phone, a voting block is a voting block. If it's split, if the street is split because they're in 2 different voting blocks, it's not the council, it's not any of us that had control over that. So anyway, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next up, I have Tina Funiki Furtado.
Well, I don't really know why I'm here tonight. Not sure if it's my master's in public administration that's coming out, or my complete disdain for fake news, or my intolerance of public bullying. But I'm pulled to publicly share what I've witnessed for the past 6 months relating to district elections. I am 1,000% supportive of district elections, simply because of its ability to encourage more voter participation by giving our disenfranchised true representation and voice. Being one vote out of 6,000 feels mute. However, being one vote out of 6,000 feels vocal. I've been following this process since October, and I was sitting in these chambers last month when, out of the blue, following months of meetings, hundreds plus map submissions, deep dive learning, transparent conversation, a council member all of a sudden yells, gerrymandering. Gerrymandering regarding a map the council, along with the community and consultants, all have been reviewing, discussing, and evaluating for months. These maps have been available on the city's website for months. Ads have been in the Coastal View, along with tons of social media posts, all encouraging community participation, and again, for months. I'm perplexed because the same city council member was the only one who developed his own maps and then proceeded to hand them out to other city council meetings during a city council meeting, trying to circumvent the process and get his map voted in. And then for the past 2 weeks, this city council member has been spreading some fake news around social media and Coastal View. And I have to ask, what's the intention here? Because as a leader in our community, sure doesn't look like you're building bridges or working at making our community a better place or finding work with solutions. Just looks like you're stirring the pot by using racially charged terms to manipulate your constituents. And what I can't understand is why. If this was truly how he felt, then why wait till the 11th hour, where we're 2 weeks away from adopting a map, and yell gerrymandering? Why now, when the council has diligently and properly moved this agenda forward as required by law, why would a so-called leader in our community create such havoc? You city council members are our community leaders, tasked with having to make some hard and difficult decisions. You're never going to please everyone, and that's not your job. Your job is to make those decisions that are best for the majority of our community. You have done your work with this process, and you have worked openly and conscientiously. I encourage you to stand in the light of integrity. Stand in your confidence. Ignore the few loud bullies who are throwing frack to pull you off your game. You are to lead. We believe in your intelligence and your ability to make decisions that are best for our entire community, not just a few. For the three of you have done a fantastic job, I see that, at learning this process by making everything open to the public. In fact, Councilmember Cardy has been begging the community to get more involved with this process from the very start. I believe in your leadership, and thank you for doing the hard job of doing what's right and not always being the most popular. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Jason Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, staff. During the last several months of the redistricting process, I have been so impressed by the level of transparency and repeated requests for public interaction by the city. I have attended a majority of the meetings either in person or virtually and have learned so much about the process. One of the biggest takeaways from attending the meetings has been understanding that this version of Plan A2 in front of us tonight was not magically plucked out of the air or handcrafted by any one person or special interest. On the contrary, the city website stated, and I won't go through, I have a whole breakdown of what Olivia and City Manager Dave Derflinger summarized very well how over all these months everything has happened precisely as the rules have been stated and the law has been written. to be followed. As Councilmember Cardy has been asking, as Tina just mentioned, you've been asking for the public to be here and speak their mind as well. The last meeting, I was one of 3 public members who, members of the public who were here supporting my, my approval of Map A2. Cutting down to the meat and potatoes and skipping the part that Olivia covered so well, I'll turn to you, Vice Mayor Clark. In a recent City Council meeting, you made the comment that Map A2 could appear as it was the product of gerrymandering. For you to do so was totally reckless. I compare it to the analogy of yelling fire in a crowded place when there is no such danger. This city has enough topics we all tend to have heavy opinions towards that often pit us against one another and create chaos to filter through. For you to stir the pot with something simple, and it's funny that we use the same phrase, but that's just what this is, it appears. For you to stir the pot with something simple and community-driven like this redistricting process, it makes me question, are you here to help people get along or feed them a false narrative to become even more divided? You of all people know exactly how the voting blocks are drawn in the software. You have submitted several versions yourself online. There's no gerrymandering, just odd shapes that cannot be altered, and you know that. And as our staff presented, you and Councilmember Alarcon were one of the members of this committee, so I feel like you have the most knowledge and education about this, how this process works. To add fuel to your fire, we will all recall a few meetings prior when you were the only City Council member handing out physical copies of a version of a map that you wanted. Should we have called that gerrymandering? So not only are you yelling fire, but you are the one standing there holding matches and a can of gas. As a reminder, the definition of gerrymandering is to manipulate the boundaries of an electoral constituency so as to favor one party or class. And if we're trying to break up streets and keep people together, that's gerrymandering, exactly. As Mr. Mitchell said, the expert behind this whole thing, you just can't do that. A block's a block. So keeping with the fire analogy, you also have a tendency to stoke your base, priming them to ignite against your associates on the dais and other members of this community. Online comments that echo your name don't appear to be said with a greater good in mind. You might not have written the comments, but you are the source these people get their information from. It appears that you have a personal interest in this process, one which doesn't serve the city well. It serves constituents best to be guided by leaders who share knowledge of how the system works.
So wrap it up there, Jason.
Sure. Not to fire them up when your version of the map is not picked. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hold the applause down, please. Trying to stay objective on this as much as we can. Donna Jordan.
Thank you and good evening, and thank you for having this on the agenda tonight. I'm just kind of in a state of shock over some of the comments that I just heard. This does not sound like Carpinteria to me. I was going to say I noted that on every one of your votes tonight, they were unanimous. And so we're on a roll. Let's see if we can keep that in mind. The action that you took at the last meeting will have an effect on the elections in Carpinteria for at least the next 10 years. This is a very important thing. And yes, I think there was very, very little public participation in this. I myself did not do a map. I didn't show up for meetings. I trusted my council to do the best they could do in picking the best map that was available. And I think one of the things that bothers me is that the only reason that I've heard for choosing map A2 was it's popular. And yet only a tiny, tiny fraction of people participated. And many people sent in many maps. So I don't think we can count the numbers and really get much out of that. I think we need to go back to the basics and see which map works best. I think map A2, and I'd like to see it come back up there if we could, is really indefensible in violation of the very rules that you set up in order to draw them. And the main one being not breaking communities of interest. And you're saying there's sometimes it can't be helped. Probably true, but in this case, the communities that have been broken can be fixed very, very easily. And I call attention to the area west of Linden where you see that big chunk out of it. What is that? That's the line going down Sterling, across Eleanor, and up Cheney. These are small side streets. Why would you want to draw those lines when you can go right across El Caro, which is a major collector street? Doesn't make any sense. And then let's come over to my neighborhood, which is the yellow neighborhood. That neighborhood is defined by Casitas Pass, Linden, Foothill, Freeway, and always has been. Why then would we bring this incursion into the lower right-hand side? What happens is a couple of the streets that we've mentioned, Star Pine, Pacific Village, have been split right down the middle. Star Pine is a one-block dead-end street, and the people have been there 30 to 40 years. This is a community of interest. It should not be split. Pacific Village is one single tract. Most of the people in there were original owners. Again, they're being split right in half. There's no reason for it. There's no need for it. You can fix this map very, very easily by doing one of two things. You can either tweak this map, and it can be done. I submitted a map that does the tweaks. I can explain them. Or you can go back to your 3 maps that you looked at first and bring map C up. Map C has the exact north of the freeway configuration that I submitted, and it meets the numbers even better than this map. It's more evenly distributed. It has a smaller discrepancy. I don't know why you wouldn't want to go there. And it doesn't look gerrymandered. It looks good. So I hope you will consider making that change either to C or to the map I sent in. It'll fix everything, we'll be unanimous, and we'll all go on happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I have Susan Malo.
Good evening, City Council members, Mayor Nomura, and staff, and thank you for not trying to pronounce my last name. It's Mayhew.
Thank you. My apologies.
No. So, first of all, I would like to thank you, City Mayor, for delving into the reasons for these maps, and you, Olivia, delving in to the reasons for these maps. But I want to expand. First of all, I don't have the loud, booming voice of many of the people in this room. So I'm going to simply speak quickly and in my usual quiet manner that, yes, this looks like gerrymandering. And it's largely because you were using the voter block. It was almost a foregone conclusion. But there should be other ways to make a decision that will have repercussions for the next 10 years. That is an important decision, and that should have a unanimous vote. So I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kevin Tway.
It's Kevin Toohey, thank you.
Ruined that one too. Batting 1,000. Sorry, everybody.
Mr. Mayor and council and staff, I'm Kevin Toohey, 5234 El Caro, here in Carpinteria. Been a 20-year resident and a small business owner. I'm in favor of A2 as proposed. Let's face it, drawing a district map is not easy. It's challenging. I think the third-party consultant did a good job. And I think it fairly represents our city, given that we're a small city. This isn't Los Angeles. Regarding previous written comments and some stated comments about the mapping process, some people have stated that there must be gerrymandering. You heard it here tonight. You've read about it. And as it relates to Pacific Village Drive, they're split down the middle in that neighborhood. Well, notwithstanding Fred's comments or the woman just speaking just prior to me, there are 7 instances in our community in map A2 where neighborhoods are split right down the middle. Communities of interest. That's just how it works. We're in a small community. This isn't where we have a large opportunity to make changes. This is very challenging. And I would add, if there's any gerrymandering, that makes the implication that someone has inappropriately or illegally drawn the map. Are those claiming or concerned about gerrymandering making the accusation that the third-party consultant inappropriately or illegally drew the map? Or has some have insinuated that our mayor or Councilmember Lee somehow have manipulated the map or gerrymandered A2? Neither had any involvement in drawing A2. Finally, there's the matter of integrity. Prior to this current situation, have any of those making such accusations ever expressed doubt or concern regarding the integrity of any of our council members? I'm not aware of any. So why is there now all of a sudden the questioning of the integrity of Mayor Nomura or of Councilmember Lee? I have known both of these men for many years and have followed their actions and activities over the years and have never seen a circumstance where I felt that they would compromise or did compromise their integrity personally or professionally. These are honest men, and I'm proud to have voted for them. The city of Carpinteria is a physically small community, and it is reasonable to expect that current council members will live not too far from each other. It's just the nature of how we're built. But to assert that there is somehow gerrymandering going on is a spurious comment and is disingenuous to the integrity of this districting process that utilized third-party consultants, as well as to the integrity of Mayor Nomura and Councilmember Lee. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have is David Rosso.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and staff. I'll try not to replicate many of the comments that you've heard tonight, but I think a couple of things have been touched on. One, that certainly this issue is not an easy decision to come by the right decision. And secondly, that there seems to be some sense that the districting process, yes, it has been foisted upon the city, upon the council, but it has an ultimate purpose. This is not a punishment to the city by the state. It's not a bad mark. This is a very important part of our democratic process. And the skate park item that you took action on prior certainly is a win-win situation. It's a feel-good benefit for the entire community, and it will certainly reflect the actions of this council for many years to come. The same applies to this action that we're talking about tonight. I would simply encourage the council to seriously consider the recommendation to reconsider this item, and also to think about the fact that I don't think any of you ran for election, took your job because you thought it was all going to be easy decisions, or as my dad used to say, you know, strawberries with honey on top. It's not going to be that way. But another very noted historian and author said that the challenge to politics and what makes a great politician is being able to rise to the challenge of a difficult decision. This may be one of those, yeah, it's difficult to make everybody happy, but on the other hand, I think if you can ultimately come to a unanimous decision, and again, it's a decision that will measure the community for many years to come, then that's a sign that you as the council have taken your responsibilities and your authority very seriously. And again, I would just encourage you to do the right thing for the right reasons. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through the mayor, just real quick, just a clarification. That is not staff's recommendation this evening to reconsider.
Thank you. Correct. Next I have Gail Marshall.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Gail Marshall, and I live in the Conchaloma neighborhood. When the districting process began, it seemed clear to me that we would end up with districts that would eliminate the seats of 2 of our council members. It seemed clear that Greg and Al would be in the same district, and Roy and Wade would be in the same district. Unfortunate, but so is the district process in a small community like ours, and we're stuck with it. I was surprised when I tuned into the hearing 2 weeks ago. I sort of dropped out of the process for a while, and I tuned in again 2 weeks ago and discovered that a map had been selected that actually did preserve the seats of 2 of the council members. So I looked at it and wondered what had happened to respecting communities of interest, a couple of them in particular. But giving the benefit of the doubt, I don't think your districting consultant saw the obvious pitfalls of map A2 when they suggested it as a possibility. They don't live in Carpinteria. They don't know our neighbors, but it's up to you as representatives to take the information given to you by staff and your consultants, dissect it for yourself, and figure it out. In my estimation, if you do that, you must come to the conclusion that map A2 does not follow the criteria that you as a council established to sort the new district lines. Fortunately, there are alternatives. There is a map, A3, that takes A2 and tweaks it, and it preserves certain neighborhoods. So what I'm asking you tonight is follow your established criteria for drawing district boundaries, respect the process, set the right tone for today and the future. The way the districting process goes this time around will set the tone for redistricting in 10 years. And I was one of the ones that brought the word, I think, consensus into the dialogue. And I am sometimes laughed out of the room for that because this is a democratic process. And generally there are winners and losers. But in a consensus, there are no winners and losers. Everyone agrees. And I think this particular process, in this particular community, at this particular time, consensus is very important. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Kathy Henry.
I'm Kathy Henry, and I want to tell you my street address. It's 5025 Pacific Village Drive. And I appreciate the work that all of you do and that you do. And that Dave went to Glendale High, and my kids were there about the same time, so it's a long process of fun. But I want to tell you my selfish little things, because you as a city council before you, 22 years ago, Bob and I were the first to buy on Pacific Village Drive in the whole tract. And we were already moved in when suddenly a city council member, a bright one, whom I won't name, discovered that your houses were too big for the size of the lots. So the next empty lot next to me, where I was going to have a view of the mountains, suddenly had to have a 2-story house in order to get more space for people to live in on a small lot. And so you directly have as a city council, affected my life in not being able to see the mountains. But now you've come in and are dividing my tract. And we're like maybe some of you don't know, it's like a cul-de-sac, L-shaped cul-de-sac, so that we've gotten to know each other more, and many of the people have been there the 22 years. And Bob and I, we got a 1-story house because we were old. In fact, I'm the oldest speaker tonight, I'm sure, 88. And Yeah, oh.
How old is Kathy?
88.
Okay.
You and I exercise together. And you really are hurting, and Roy's down the street, and it's the nicest family and lives next door to my son. And so you are directly affecting me personally. I'm not talking about the big things that you should have had. This should have never been for a small town like this, as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, we now will be trying to agree on things with two different city councilmen. Maybe one wants the street paved one way and the other wants the street paved another way. I mean, I don't know how it's going to affect, but it has destroyed our little things, and I'm just being selfish. And the red light's on, so have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Through the mayor, could I just make one quick comment? Something that you don't really think about when you draw these lines and you want to keep a neighborhood together. Picture two people in that neighborhood running for the city council and they have two separate platforms. You're talking about goofing a neighborhood up. That would goof a neighborhood up.
Next up, I have Lisa Gervitz.
I'm older than I thought, too. Thank you, Mayor and council members. And a lot of what I was going to say has been said, so I'm going to keep this super brief. As an interested community member, I attended the district elections ad hoc committee meetings, which were referred to earlier, and I felt that the process was run with integrity and fairness. And I believe that is the goal for all of you. And so I do ask that you reconsider putting forward only the map A2 and add on another map. The bottom line is I don't see the downside of adding another map as an option. There have been numerous submitted ones. I'm sure your consultant can come up with one that divides up those blocks differently. The census blocks, there were many maps that took those census blocks into consideration in a different way. And I just don't see the downside of adding another map. And I also agree that this is a super important decision and would show our community, instead of being divisive, that we can find some unity and cohesiveness around this. And I also ask that you find some compromises, and that way you can have some consensus and unanimity on your vote. Thank you for your diligence in making sure that the maps that dictate the districts for the next 10 years serve the city well, with fairness and pride of the process that will carry us forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Janice Sugiyama.
Yeah, Janice Sugiyama, 6063 Jacaranda Way. I commend all of you for your work, and I commend the audience for being so nice to you. But the truth is, there's probably no one fair way to write maps for this city. The city is so small. When I came here 35 years ago, I thought it was small, but and I got consistently lost. And one of the reasons why is, we really didn't have a good city map. I found this out when we contracted from Marburg to Harrison, and the trucks were going everywhere because they didn't really know where the city lines were. In fact, our neighbors off on, is it La Tierra? One side of the street is the city of Carpinteria, one side of the city is the county. And we could tell this by their trash bins and the color. But the Harrison thing was a good move because we got recycling first. So anyway, so what I'm trying to say is there's no one fair way, and there's no one fair result. I mean, the city and the county decided, okay, you can wave at each other, because and then this also had the confusion of all the elections and stuff, even at the time. People buy a house here, and they don't know if they're in the city or if they're in the county. And because we keep 90313 as a zip code that both county and city residents have. So imagine that, and then you look at the school district, the way those are all done, and people who don't even live in the district can run for the school board, and we put people that don't live in the city on our councils and commissions. So we have been very good about, trying to be diverse, trying to get inclusiveness, but the truth is, it's not that way for everybody, and that's why the government is demanding this redistricting process. Now, as a woman of color, I would say, yeah, this is a good idea, because when I ran for city council and all the years I've observed council, we don't really have a diverse representation. What does the yellow one mean?
You can go a little bit more there, Janice.
All right. Well, let me wrap it up because you guys are getting tired, and it's very rare that you have a council meeting this long. But, I agree that consensus is important, but I also agree that you're going to have to make a choice one way or the other, and whatever choice you make is probably not going to be fair to somebody. And but you know what they used to say about consensus when I was served? Consensus is when no one's happy.
Thank you, Janice. Okay, anybody else wishing to speak in the audience? If not, I'll go to the online.
Aaron, do we have speakers?
Yes. Jim Reginato?
Yes.
Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can, Jim.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make this long. I just think that I support what Donna Jordan and Gail Marshall said. And I don't see why there should be so much animosity against changing a map a little bit. Yeah. I think a slight change in A2 would be best all the way around for everybody. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, anybody else?
No further comments.
Here.
No further comments.
Okay. Thank you. At this time now, I will close public comment.
Your Honor,
Yes.
could I respond to some of the comments made about me? Thank you. I've been part of the mapping process from the beginning, and we're following it all along, and we take this very seriously. People had a lot of questions about whether it was going to fit for Carpinteria, and yet it seemed like there was an opportunity to provide more diversity, more people, an opportunity to possibly get elected to city council, and so I was for that. And, we came along, and I didn't hand out my map at city council. I didn't physically hand out my map, but I made a map, and I referred to it in city council. But we came with 3 or 4 maps, I think 4 maps to begin with, and I was looking at them. My primary criteria for selecting a map was, can we get 2 or 3 districts that have a Latino majority of 50% plus 1, because that's our majority of community of interest that we're looking at, and I, map A came along, and Roy and Greg liked it, and I thought, yeah, it's got the right. It does what I want, and then so we elevated it, and during the time we elevated, I took a little bit closer look at it, and it did some funny things. And could we put the maps back up? Is that possible? So can you expand that?
You'll have to speak into that mic. Somehow, you can carry it.
Somehow, yeah. No, I'm not going to be able to do that. In. Not out, in. Okay, up to, yeah, right there. So what you have, well, I shouldn't have had you expand it yet. But anyway, to the east, we have the area of the Baylord condos and mobile home parks. And so we had some speakers from that area tonight. And to me, that represented a distinct community of interest. It's basically multiple family housing. And then coming to the west in the yellow district, that's all single family neighborhood. So that seemed to me like a different community of interest. So now can you expand in again? So the addition of 2 census blocks, and I would go to the map and show you where they are. Is it census block here or census block here? 2 census blocks, or maybe it's, I guess, this one and this one. Those extend one district into the other district. And to do that, you're actually, what you're doing is you're lessening the population deviation. So adding those 2 census blocks to the district to the east is not needed. It's a fine district all in of itself. By adding those 2 census blocks, it looks like that, well, when at the last meeting, I didn't say it was gerrymandering. I said it looks like gerrymandering because I hadn't figured it out yet. I don't really, it doesn't make any difference to me if it's gerrymandering or not. What's important is that it weakened the population deviation. It also weakened the ability of that district to qualify as a community of interest, which we wanted to support. We have 2 or 3 districts that were Latino, 50% plus 1, and so it weakened that because of the population shift, and then it also It also had some effects on the west over there. I guess because those 2 census blocks were added there, you had to go further into the blue district and create some deviation there. And so yes, you're going to split some neighborhoods. There's no way you can draw any of these maps without splitting some neighborhoods. But does that mean that we should do it as much as we possibly can, or should we try to minimize that happening? And so the way this is drawn is that it, at least where the green arm comes up from the condos and picks up the single family homes over there, you're breaking up Pacific Village Drive, you're breaking up Star Pine, and you're breaking up Cameo neighborhoods. And so if there's a way to get around that, I think we should do that. And the same thing happens in the blue district over there. So we had it narrowed down at 1.3 choices, and I believe those are included in our staff report tonight. And former Mayor Donna Jordan mentioned that Map C did that, and so I think that Map C, I didn't approve it at first because it went across the freeway. And that was one of my criteria that I wanted to have in making a map, was that we recognize this natural boundary of the freeway. But Map C does it. Now, Map C could be adopted as it is and avoid the problems with Map A2 that I've identified. Or you could ask Map C to be tweaked, because the part on the other side of the freeway that Map C picks up there's nobody actually lives there. If you do these maps, you can see what the population is in each census block. And there's no people that live in that. Is that map C? Well, if you look south of the freeway in the purple area, that's the Bluffs. And nobody lives there. Yeah, we have some commercial buildings out there, but nobody lives in that commercial buildings, which is unusual. No, it's not unusual. It's different than the Cindy Lane, Mark Lane area. You actually have areas in there that have registered voters. But anyway, that's, I think that's, but we should elevate that map to be considered as well as A2, and that doesn't mean we're picking it. That means we're just having a wider range of choices. And I appreciate all the comments tonight. I didn't want to be the bringer of bad news, but that's it. And so I would like to, if I may, move that we elevate map C to be considered along with map A2 at the March 28th meeting.
Okay, matter of order here. First of all, we have to vote whether or not we're going to even consider
Okay.
the change.
All right.
If that passes and we do decide to, then we would probably go into discussion for other options or
Very good.
opportunities. At this time, though, we still have our original action in place.
Right, okay.
So,
May I make a few
Yeah,
comments?
sure, you bet.
Okay. So, the district elections is one of the most important probably decisions that we're going to be making, and it's going to stick for the next 10 years. At the last city council meeting, I shared concerns about the deviation, the percent of deviation of A2. And in full transparency, I felt as though, knowing that we have 5 public hearings to decide on a map, that to decide for during public hearing number 4 was premature. I truly believe that it's important to have options that we're bringing to our community to ensure that we're choosing the best map. I cannot say that A2 is the best map for our community at this time. And I want to also mention, although I hope you members don't feel like I need to say this, but I want to clarify that this is not an attack on any single council member. This is truly coming from a place that in order for me to pick the right map, we need to have the options on the table. We have time. It's limited time, but we still have time. And so some of the concerns, as mentioned, is the deviation, the percentage in deviation. And yes, it's within the 10%, absolutely. It doesn't mean that we can't try to lessen that. The other piece that has been discussed quite a bit is the communities of interest. And so from my perspective, I would be happy to continue to have A2. I mean, well, first we need to decide if this is going to go anywhere. A2 and a modified A2 version, whatever that may be, A3 on the table to take a really good look at. And I really hope that at that point, if we get to that point, we really start looking at these communities in more depth. I think that was lacking. I would be happy to take ownership of that, but on behalf of the council in previous hearings. So that's really my perspective in bringing this to the table. I didn't feel like we could move on to the 5th hearing without bringing this up to my fellow council members.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I want to say that first, I'm hurt and disappointed by all the accusations by people who I look up to and respect. So it's been tough. With that said, we all agree on a boundary, and that's the freeway. And map C, B, and C doesn't meet that criteria, and we all agreed. So to go back on it, there's no perfect map. they will never be that subjective as well as community interests. I do feel like people were attacking us, and it's hard to see everybody be so mean and difficult. So I'm sticking to my original A2. So I'm not in favor of changing or amending anything.
Okay. I'll make some comments on it because this may make some difference to how we move forward. I myself thought the process went in accordance with A2 as a priority. However, in order to keep it transparent, I would suggest, as Natalia did want to make another comment that was blocked out during the action time, that we take a look at a potential second option, whether that be A3 or whatever we decide to. At least this way, we hear the comments from the public. We aren't pushing one specific one forward, and we will have the opportunity to hear a second time some more of the opportunities that we move forward. This is going to be a big decision. We're looking at living with this for the next 10 years. Well, I personally want to make sure we have it. And again, from the very beginning, the last thing I want is to have a divided community. So because of that, I think it's important that we show the transparency that we have. And because of that, I would, in my opinion, I would like to see this move forward to bringing in a second option beyond A2. So,
Mayor Demora, before you call for a vote, you moved from public comment to a discussion, but there was also public comment that had been submitted into the record, and I just wanted to read those names.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure, you bet. You can do that now.
We had public comment submitted in writing from Kevin Toohey, Randall Moon, Russell Ruiz, Mike Wondolowski, Lorraine McIntyre, Robert Sadivi, Jane Diaz, Jane Tabor, Amrita Som, and Frank Ochoa prior to this meeting, and it was distributed to council.
Thank you. That being said, I guess the motion that I would be looking for is to open up the options again for the next meeting, and include A2, and take a look at another option. But we would first have to reverse our decision from the last meeting.
Through the mayor. Our last meeting, I wasn't comfortable with not having a consensus. I mean, I went home that evening and it was hard to sleep, actually. I would like to see a consensus if possible, but there's a good chance that may not happen. And another thing I'd like to clarify is we all received some letters, and one of them said that we aren't listening to the public. And I based all my information on just about all of it, the criteria and the consultant, and listening to the public. And I didn't draw a map. I'm looking at them now. I kind of stayed out of it on purpose because I thought it's probably best if the councilman doesn't draw the map. So that was my reasoning on that. But I pretty much agree with our mayor that I would like to go forward and submit a couple of the A2, keep it on the plate, but because I believe it has merit, and have a second option.
Would you like to make that a motion?
I'll make that the motion.
Thank you. We have a
Or
motion.
actually, we have to have a different motion first, I believe.
Yeah, Mayor, if I could. So as we talked about, and I think some of your mayor and other council members have indicated, just for clarity, the first vote would be a vote to reconsider the motion made at the February 28th City Council meeting.
Correct. I believe that's what Greg was making, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe it'll like you say, we don't want to divide the community. That's the last thing we want to do, and it'll give us a little bit more time to actually study them even closer, you know. But there'll always be one group or groups or many groups that don't like one of the decisions, and so we're going to have to deal with that one way or the other, no matter what plan we pick. So just keep that in mind that everybody doesn't agree on, I don't think you can get 100% agreement throughout the community of Carpinteria, although we do get a lot of people thinking the same in Carpinteria. So I pray this whole process works well, and I have faith in our community of picking. I want the input from the public, and I've gotten quite a bit of input recently, and I'm being pulled in all different directions, to tell you the truth. And I want the outcome to be the right one. I love Carpinteria.
So I have a motion on the floor. I'll need a second. Do I have a second from anybody?
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this, on the item of reconsideration? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Cardy?
Aye.
Councilmember Alarcon?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
No.
Vice Mayor Clark?
Aye.
Mayor Namor?
Aye. Okay, this actually becomes a second part then, so we'll have to give direction to staff on now what to reconsider. I think, Greg, you had a comment you made about A2 and a possible modification version.
I don't know if I want to modify it, but I'd like to see, Donna Jordan, there's one called Donna Jordan, and I think it's pretty much the same as where to go? Clark had a plan 79756. I think those two they may be identical. That I personally, I'd like to see that one move forward.
There's only 2 districts drawn there, but the
Well, your map, you have one number 79756. I think is pretty much the same.
I don't know. I mean, it's she drew just how to fix that, what some people perceive to be problems with map A2, and that was a way just to fix that. But you can say, well, okay, the 3rd district is left by default of the top above the freeway. So the real question is going to be, how do you divide the bottom up? And there's different ways to do that. I had a version, and some other people had a different version of how to divide it up. I think map A2 has a version to divide it up, and I think that's fine, the way that map A2 did south of the freeway.
Yeah, so
I would suggest this, because we should probably set some guidelines. First of all, I think it's important that we decide what our hard barriers are. For example, A2 was pretty much not unanimous, but most people support it because the 101 corridor divided the city.
Yes.
Then we had a beach side, and we had the mountain side, or also that part that is affected by the county line more specific. I think that guideline is good. What we would do inside that model, we could then take a look at and retweak there. But my suggestion would be maybe we keep A2 as is and bring forth another version that fits with the 101 corridor being the dividing line of the two areas.
Well, through the mayor.
Well, map A2 already does that.
Correct.
Yeah. Well,
Correct.
then
what
I'm
requesting
requesting is a modification to A2 with that modification
There
to it right there.
Okay.
So that's a possibility.
All right, so that's.
And are you okay with that?
Of course.
Are you, Natalia? Okay, that's what I'm.
Mayor Namor, Paul, our consultant, has his hand up, and I don't know if it's going to be of value for you to hear his
My
comment.
apologies there, Paul. Small hand, I don't see it.
I was just going to mention, and I could share on my screen, there was a plan A3, which I think is doing what is being verbally described.
Right.
Adjusting that portion at above the freeway, and then making the related adjustments while also maintaining that division, 2 districts underneath the freeway and 1 above.
Okay.
Are you able to share that there, Paul?
I can if somebody will give me the ability to share my screen as well as talk. Right now, it's just allowing me to talk. Here we go. This is the draft plan A3. A member of the community who spoke referenced it, so I think it was discussed at least once during one of the earlier meetings. It brings this area together in a way that is different than the current plan in order to offset the population change that's going out of B. It takes this part into B, creating the division line between B and D right here. So it makes some more compact shapes there. The public submission that we saw online was just a drawing of A and B only, but this would be the natural application of that to the plan A2. Another plan that was discussed was C, but you can see C doesn't keep the idea of only 2 districts above the freeway, where A3 does.
Yeah, I like A2 modified with that
So
on the
A2
mountain
and
side of the
A3.
freeway.
He counted that one A3, correct?
Yeah, this one's called A3.
A3's, I don't know. That's different, isn't it?
This is A3 right here that's on the screen.
The bottom's the same as A2?
Yeah, I can bring up A2 as well.
Yeah, it does look like it is.
This is A2, and this is A3. So you can see the only difference really is in this relationship between A and B goes to that. So it's more of a box-like, and B's coming all the way across the top. And then the relationship here in between D and B, and I believe that's just one census block. It's just that that one change keeps it within the 10% total plan deviation. So that's A2, and that's A3.
Good with that, Greg?
Yep.
Okay.
But like I said earlier, I'm reiterating myself, there'll be groups that don't like whatever one we come up with, and we want to get it as best we can in few of those people as possible. So I'm in favor of putting the modified A2
Okay.
as shown, as one of the 2.
Any other discussion on that?
I do. I just feel like I'll be targeted by Al for whatever reason to modify or amend the map. And I don't know what you're doing, but
Well,
Uh,
A2 is still coming forward.
yeah, but
One quick comment, I'm not saying I'm in favor of, right at this point, of A3, but I think to be fair to the community with the response that we've gotten, I think it's important that we include it.
and the people who said that have falsely accused us too, so I just,
Would you would you like to make that a motion?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a motion, bring forward A2 and A3 as shown in the version there. Do we have a second for that?
I will second.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I'd like to make one comment. At this point right now, I still favor A2.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment if I may.
Sure.
Roy, I'm not targeting you. I'm trying to get the best map for the community. That's not the point.
I don't know. It doesn't feel like that to me. It feels like, do what you gotta do. So
Okay. Any other discussion?
Mayor, I'd like some clarification on the motion, please.
You bet.
So I heard the motion by Councilman McCarty to refer to the Jordan map that's up on the big screen here, and it to be an amendment to A2. I know it's very similar to A3, but when you repeated the motion, you referred to A3. We could look at combining those. We could bring them both forward and illustrate the differences. Again, I think they're very similar, if not the same. But I just wanted to get clarification on which map we're referring to.
The reason
for the
we are talking
additional
about
map.
A3 is because the Jordan map, quote, the Jordan map is not a completed map. It doesn't have all of the sections. We are assuming and believe that A3 is replicating the modifications specific to the Jordan map.
And if I may, since the consultant has already looked at it and given us some data about that, I mean, he's studying it and thinks it will work, you know, for our mapping criteria. And, you know, so we don't know how the other one's going to play out. I think that's the A3 is
So-
kind of the intent of what.
So the motion was
Jordan map
specific to
was
A3,
supposed to
A2
do.
and A3.
Well, we kind of need some clarification. Is A3 the same as Donna Jordan on the mountainside of the freeway and the same as A2 on the other side?
Yes, it is. I just tried to show that this is the A3 map.
That's what I was.
That's A3 right there. You're looking
I just
A3
want to make
right
that
here,
clear
and
that it
here's
is
Donna
clear.
Jordan's submission is right here. It has the exact same boundary here, exact same boundaries. It even has this boundary down here is exact same. So it's the same on both this and in A3, which is here.
And everything on the beach side of the freeway is the same as A2.
Yes, everything on the beach side of the freeway is the same as A2.
Okay, that's clear to me now.
Thank you.
That's what my motion was based on.
Okay. Good?
Thank you.
Good there,
Good.
Dave?
Thanks.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll request a roll call vote on this, please.
Councilmember Cardy?
Aye.
Councilmember Alarcon?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
No.
Vice Mayor Clark?
Aye.
Mayor Namora?
Aye. Thank you.